Let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha. This is Dr. Sasha Lessin. You know, this is echoing. That's very weird. But hello anyway. Janet is trying to get some Richard Allen Miller as our guest to come and do the show. This is Revolution Radio, of course, and she's back.
Yeah, we're getting our guest on today, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. So, Mad Painter, call Dr. Rick, because I called him and he was waiting for, I guess he's waiting for Hawaii to call him, but I said, no, we're trying to call you, so pick it up. So he should be able to get it. Okay, so Dr. Richard Allen Miller is a pioneer in the annals of metaphysical and paranormal exploration.
Yes, sir. We're good to go.
Oh, you're there. Okay. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, we are live with you. And I'm Janet Carol Lessin, here with Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, my co-host. Our producer is Thomas Becker, a Mad Painter. This is Revolution Radio, and the show is called Stargate to the Cosmos. And Sasha, let's just do a sound check and bring on and start the show with Dr. Rick. Sasha, are you there?
Yes, I am. And, it's nice to...
Hey.
I wish I could say hi to Mad Painter. Hi.
He's there. Say hi to the Mad Painter. He's there.
I did. Yeah. I tried sending him email this morning and it bounced. So.
Okay. Well, the world is bouncing. Everything
seems to be broken now. Yeah, everything seems to be broken now. Email, everything. There just seems to be glitches in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it's what's to come.
I think that this is the beginning of a...
Lately?
Yeah. Well, I have an opinion. I think we're going to see more of this as time goes on, because I've been told that there's a war going on right now between supercomputers. The Google, Apple machine is battling the dark web. The dark web is battling the feds. The feds are battling. And what's happening is that they're beta testing to see when they can cause things to crash in tricks and things like WooCommerce or whatever, PayPal handshake. And I've observed how this is creeping into everybody's life.
So what's the benefit of crashing everything? Don't they really need us to feed their money machine?
Money is going to be the least of it. Right now, it's going to be about food, water, and the grid collapsing. When the grid collapses, people are going to panic, and that's the first serious problem, when people panic. Once they panic, have no trust in our government, then it becomes outlaws. And then the outlaws, like East LA, being out of food. Watch what happens next. People panic.
Who's doing this? Who wants to send, is it the whole world into chaos? Is it just the United States into chaos? Who is this person or being or
we could spend a week.
Is it extraterrestrials? Well, that's fine.
The correct answer is yes, all of the above. All of the above.
So it's what? It's extraterrestrials that want to. Somebody said that this is the harvest. This is what Come to the Harvest is about. This is the harvest. This is our humanity is
the harvest. That's a good word. How about terraforming? That's a good word too. Watching it in front of our eyes. What lives in a radioactive society? Black goo. That's one thing that lives really good. I don't know what.
Black goo. Dr. Rick, what do you know about black goo? We've heard that tossed around for a long time. What's your
I know about black mold. Black goo is related to black goo, black mold. And we have black mold everywhere in our lower forests. Right. Down here in Oregon. It's extremely toxic. It's in everything. And when you get water in your basement and then the black molds form in, the house is uninhabitable. Literally.
Yeah, but you can kill it out. We've killed black mold. You can get rid of it. It's not.
I don't know how your house is doing, but I've got, barbarians at my gate, and I don't have an answer. And I'm real smart, and I don't have an answer. I'm watching how things are failing everywhere in everything. The customer service. Just look at the way that people are treating each other now and the way they drive. I mean, why? Well, millennials and value systems are aside. When you realize that we are no longer, seeing our children as our single most important natural resource, we're doomed. And they have turned America into a shell because of just that alone. The educational systems are shamble. It's a disgrace. Mm-hmm. And when you realize that people like myself are out trying to leave some empowerment, and I'm fortunate. My name on those lists, I'm on a government watch list. Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. But because of what I do. You are too, by the way. That means right out of the gate, some hacker is going to be experimenting on your site or whatever just to see what he can do because you're an enemy. You're not. But definitions and who's what. And it's about nationalism versus globalism. It's no longer Republican and Democratic Party. There was a time when both of those parties wanted the same thing for America. They just wanted to do it differently. That's all changed. I remember the look on my father's face when he realized he was no longer a Republican. And Democrats, it's crazy out there. And to impeach I didn't vote for Trump. I voted against Clinton. I'm military. I've seen and what she's done. I live in Southern Oregon, down near Bundy Ranch. The uranium to Russia, that kind of thing.
Dr. Rick, I don't want to do politics on the show. Okay? It's too much. It's just too much. Yeah. So I don't want to do Democrat, Republican. I'll do extraterrestrials against humans or something. The rich against
I
the
know,
and
you're never going to really know what actually happened because it doesn't work like that. What happened in building 9/11 and during 9/11? What happened to building 7? Well, we know that it wasn't jet fuel because fuel doesn't get that hot to vaporize steel. We know that Paradise down in California was not new particle beam weapons. It was one smart meter going unstable to the next one. What's going to happen with 5G is that it's going to be eventually illegal because it has dosimetry. It is toxic. That's that. And once people realize that, Katati and other small towns are outlawing it. And up here in Oregon, there are full counties now where you can't have 5G. And so what will happen ultimately is those people that opted for it are going to have to pay to have it removed. It's both ways, man. And that's a broken system. PG&E has claimed, no contest. And for the fires that happened down in California last year, it's everything is broken. And the presidency is supposed to represent our most scholarly, educated, and morally correct individual. And look at what they offer us for candidates, plural. Not even talking about independent parties or whatever. It's a disgrace. And I don't have an answer.
I will talk on that level. I think that people need to be qualified for their jobs. And there should be some qualifiers, like education.
I haven't met anybody that I felt was qualified.
Experience, background. Well, I think what we need to have is a council like we used to have in Samaria, like a council of 12, and not have a presidential branch where we have one person that is so powerful that he or she.
Well, that's what the judicial and legislative branches were about. We were supposed to have the Senate and the House of Representatives, and we have different kinds of houses that would balance each other, and then we would have federal judges that would, oversee issues or questions of, that all failed.
Well,
it's failing.
See how it can be corrupted and taken over, and the checks and balances are not in place. So,
and I'm not politically correct. I mean, I don't know politics. I'm
just talking about systems analysts, not politically correct or not politically correct, but how to govern and run governance systems analysis, and what systems will work, and how do we meet the needs of our. The government's supposed to be for the people. And help meet the needs of the people so they have a better life. We're supposed to enjoy life and have fun while we're alive, not be in a...
well, California started communities, They had the gated communities where they would have, small, like Anastasia in Russia or something, where there would be groups of Mennonite or Doukhobor or whatever. They would move in a group and, try to become semi-autonomous where they were a closed system. We call those things sustainable lifeboats. Those are lifeboats with oars where there's communities. We have down in Arapahoe, I have a missile silo run by 12 families that are using vertical aquaculture right down the Nike site. And guess what? They're able to feed over 250,000 people. And then there's the city of Chattanooga. Right here, right now, is their logo. And every single restaurant on the Chattanooga River right now has a greenhouse. They produce, Chattanooga right now produces 20% of the food they consume, not 3 like you or me. And Hawaii, where you're living, so what's going to happen when the grid goes down is that Hawaii is going to become isolated, and the next thing you know, your city of refuge is going to be overflowing with need because everything is brought into Hawaii today.
We could plant things. We could grow things. We have cows. We have all the different ecosystems. We have the mountain where we can grow apples and we have different ecosystems. We could, if we got our shit together and stopped being dependent on Walmart and Costco, go back.
I know I don't have the answer.
Well, we have some ideas. We don't have the answer. I don't think there is the answer. but we do have ideas for sustainability and for surviving, and for transitioning into something that works. So let's go back in time, a little time machine here. When I was a kid.
Well, okay, and that's fair, and I'll do that. You know, I'm just a grumpy old man, and I don't know what I can do to help people, you know?
Yeah, but we can go back and think, how did we used to do before? So when I was a kid, in 5 minutes I could be to a farm. So I used to go visit farms. I love farms. My daddy was a postal worker. We had a route, and his friend had a farm, and they would let me go to the farm, and I'd run around with the cows and the pigs and you know, I don't think they had goats, but they had food, and they were feeding these animals, and everything was organic. Nothing was, you know, like today. And then, you know, you go another 5 minutes and there'd be another farm. There'd be houses in between that weren't farms, but there were actually farms right now where there's massive malls. We just started breeding and spreading out and taking away this valuable farmland and putting in big, massive malls. But we used to have, only 3 billion people, right? In the 50s, after World War II, there was about 3 billion. Is that sustainability for this planet? Is there a level that we can ascertain which is viable, where we can support ourselves without digging up the earth and destroying everything? Sasha, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I'm here, Janet.
Chime in.
Sorry.
Say something. You're too quiet. Say something, Sash.
Well, you see, from my perspective, I think that it's beyond synchronicity the way things work, and everything must be part of a larger system. And so I would suggest that in being dualistic, we embrace everything and say, this is a perfect time. We're being challenged. The challenge is giving us opportunities to learn more in our path. From my perspective, things are quite wonderful. I enjoy talking to all you people out there in Radio Land, and to you, Richard Allen, and to you, Janet, and I have cats. And I think that this is the best time there ever was. It's also a very challenging time, but the challenge is part. As we know from Prejean's work, it's the perturbations and the chaos that can lead us to organize into a more inclusive level. There is no other. Everything is in you, and you're in everything. All we got to do is connect. It's perfect. Just dig it.
What do I say to that? You know, que sera, sera. I mean, get a grip. I believe in freedom of speech, and yet it's not allowed. And now we have alternate media to be distinguished differently from large corporate media that has agendas. You know, I remember when I was a kid and I'd listen to Walter Cronkite. And when Dan Rather came on, it was a little different, but there was always a Charles Kuralt, you know, on the road where he did something with a positive spin to it. And I used to really appreciate that. Where is that now? Well, it doesn't sell. That's why they don't do it, because it isn't about how many people were shot up in that school. And most of what's going on in schools is so abominable. Now, when I was a kid, I'm 76 years old, and when I was a child in second grade, they required you to study Latin. Sum est, sumus est sunt.
Wow.
Now, you tell me why and where that went. Then, in high school, they taught you trades like woodworking, drafting, and they called it mechanical drawing, and shop, and athletics. Where did that go? Well, the athletics took on, because that's what we are. We're going just like Rome did. And Nero has got his fiddle. And I am watching it without having really very much. There's nothing I can do. I can try to say something. So what I do is I stay with my nerd thing. And that's what I've been doing. I've made a discovery in medicine. As you know or not, I did Harvard Medical. I'm not only a physicist, I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm a medical doctor. And I have discovered that there are subtle bodies outside the body that have been described in literature for centuries, like chi. And what these bodies are, you can go, if you can reach one of those bodies, you can change placebo from 10% to 60% just by microdosing with mushrooms. How does that work? I'm writing about that physics right now. It turns out it isn't about physics, because physics does not have the answers any more than religion does. That's why you have two brains. In physics, you make assumptions. You look at that fence over there, and you say, well, what color is that fence? Oh, it's brown. But actually, you have made an assumption because you can't see the other side of the fence as a metaphor. And that is where science has lost it. Space and time are not real. They're constructs in the way a human being, not a cetacean like a whale or a dolphin, whatever, they relate to space and time quite differently than man does. I was part of John Lilly's studies when Carl Sagan brought me in to do the language. They wanted to know if the dolphin clicks and whistles was a form of language. And I was only there 10 days. And their language is a form of pure algebra. Their redundancy coefficient is 10 times more efficient than Hebrew. And the whale that sing these songs is like Enemy Mine or the Navajo that have medicine, where they pass their history through song. And I have seen this and realized that we think ourselves to be the center of everything, and we haven't got a clue. And when you try to reverse engineer a UFO craft, imagine a farmer from the 1890s trying to understand the way a radio, breaker 17, come on, how that works. It's not possible. And when I've been in labs, I've seen alien technology. I've actually witnessed it. I did a thing at the University of Chicago with something that was electrophoretic. It had memory on its shape. I fired a 50 caliber cannon at it, and within 20 seconds, it went back into its original form. I went down with an electron microscope looking for a lattice damage. It was like fullerenes, only even more. So here we are at the edge of tomorrow, and none of us have a clue, because it isn't about the future or the past. It's about the moment, and that's all we have. And so I'm trying to figure out how to stay here longer, and I just came up with a model that seems to work really well with using neurotransmitters as resonant cavity oscillators. That's how you dialogue with external bodies like chi.
Okay, explain that to us. Break it down. Unpack it. How do we stay?
So when you take a psychedelic, a drug, LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, that's a toxin. And the body freaks out and produces a look-alike chemistry that it has already using as a neurotransmitter called lysergic acid amide. And that then gets overproduced to blank out the toxin, which is broken down and in the urine within 20 minutes. Today, they're using mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, in microdosing to try to somehow heal the physical body better. And we've now are starting to realize with CBDs and the constructs of hemp over marijuana that there's something else going on here in physical chemistry. When you find dimethyltryptamine in the most commonest of plants, crabgrass, you have to realize there's something else going on here. That's like a delivery system from God. Mm-hmm. Because that's a very complex little molecule, and to find it in crabgrass, Phalaris, that's nuts. And so, what does this all mean? Well, when you produce your neurotransmitter, you then have dialogue with a series of different subtle bodies outside the physical body. What psychics have often said is the aura, whatever. There's many names for it. I have watched Cassius Clay hit Sonny Liston with a roundhouse and knocked Sonny Liston up in the air and down flat on his back out cold. And yet, on closer inspection, Cassius Clay didn't even touch him. Now, I have Sifus that can do that. They can knock you across the room with thought alone, calling it chi. What is that? How does that work? Well, I don't know. What I do know is that altered states of consciousness are the new frontier for study in advanced physics, because the laws of physics change. And what I'm doing now is trying to set an ontology going from one mystical state to another, where the laws of physics change from here to there. And what that suggests is that there's never going to be a TOE, or theory of everything. What there's going to be is imagination is reality. If you see it in your mind's eye, that's what makes it real, not the physics and not the belief system.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it's a model. It doesn't mean it's right. It's a way of looking at something. And by the way, just by me doing that means there's going to be a better way to ascribe it in 20 years. Trust me. It won't work like the way I'm saying. Okay, that's important to realize, because, in my opinion, there are as many different laws of physics as there are human beings. And the altered states, we haven't even begun to explore that region. It's always been a no-no.
So, are they permitting studies on it now, or is this all going to be?
Well, Oxford, right now, Oxford is big time on the study of microdosing. I've got a professor emeritus there that's waiting for my book out on that subject. I don't know where this is all going. What I can tell you is that I am just one lead scout of many trying to lead a path of humanity toward more empowerment. Because once you do that, it doesn't matter what's going out there. The truth, like when they called me Molnar, the real Fox Molnar, I'm not Molnar. The truth isn't out there. It's inside you. And it's different for each of us. That's what I know at this point. I'm a meditator. I'm a Satsangi. I got initiated by Sharon Singh back in the 70s, early 70s. And I've been practicing and training my mind for years. And I can tell you, I don't know.
Well, Dr. Lessin, you studied with Stan Groff, and he was doing the experiments with LSD psych. And tell the history of Stan Groff and how he got LSD. What was it? What was the number? 20.
Okay. Stan was a physician in Prague, which is was the capital of a Soviet province called Czechoslovakia, and his dad owned a whole bunch of. Hadn't been taken over totally yet. His dad owned a bunch of drugstores, and the JK came in, and the communists got bigger and bigger and confiscated Stan's dad's stores. Anyway, Stan was a psychoanalyst, trained to stay out of sight and let people just talk. And he got a thing from Santos Labs. A guy said, "Hey, I got this stuff. I think it was. I've been working on abortifacts." This guy's name was Hoffman, and this is stuff. It's called lysergic acid diethylamide 25, he tells his story about how he got some on his fingers and absorbed it, and said, "This is a psychomimetic. You can give it to your patients or your doctors and nurses and go crazy, and maybe you'll get to know how the schizophrenic people in your hospital are crazy, and you can help them." And so Stan started giving it to his nurses and his doctors and his caretakers to see how it would work. Very, very small doses. And he found no matter what their background, they would go, after a while, they would relive stuff from their childhood. They would have spiritual experiences. They would experience other dimensions, all kinds of things like that. And they'd jump in your arms and want to be held, and things like that. That was not what normal psychoanalysts did. Anyway, So after a while, Stan decided he would have these low dosage trips supervised by his doctors and nurses on schizophrenics who were long prepared, expecting to go into their childhood. And he gave them these low dosage, and then if people they were prepared for a week, and for the whole next week they were talked to by their counselors, and intensive. And people started getting well, which was terrible for Stan, because this was, by now, Czechia had taken over Czechoslovakia, and it was a communist system, and the commie bosses were using the chicks for sex and the dudes for gardeners, and they wanted them crazy. They didn't want them to get healthy and get out of there. So Stan got an opportunity to talk at the University of Maryland, I think National Science Foundation. He brought his 2 boxes of notes with him about all his LSD research, and he asked for asylum. And they granted it to him, and he did his experiments for the hey, this is supposed to be Richard's thing. I know lots.
I know. I just want a little background on that. So anyway, this was what year was this approximately?
Okay, I'll finish. Back in the 50s, he did these intensive tests with people that alcoholics, acute schizophrenics, criminally insane, rabbis, priests, artists, and he found the same kind of things happen no matter what their background. And again, he published his stuff in Psychology Today.
I can add to this also, by the way. When I worked for the military back in the early 70s, we knew about aliens, but back then we were way more worried about what the Russians were doing. It was called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And the problem was, the Russians back then were not of the high tech that we find them today. It was Prague and Czechoslovakia. That's where they were doing advances that we don't even have equivalents to even today. Now, Dr. Milan Riesel was one I got to debrief when he came over with his concepts of hypnosis and ESP. And back then, both of those words were pseudosciences. And he was describing an altered state of consciousness where your ability in guessing could increase over 400 times. I wrote a book about that dedicated to him. And the thing that is about that was the first protocol that was used for dissecting SEAL Team 1. They measured their ESP. They wanted people to be intuitive before they even started to select down on who was going to be a SEAL. That was when it was called SEAL Corp out of Amherst. And we did the initial studies up in anesthesiology at the University of Washington before Hammeroff was even in diapers. And when we were doing that, we came up with the concept of a microtubule. And I sent you an article as part of Chapter 7 on time travel that talks about the moment and the moment just after death when there is a 5-gram weight loss in the body. What is that? Well, today we believe that it's structured water inside a microtubule in a subtle body that is known as chi. It's outside the body, very close to the body. So close, the physical body isn't even real in the sense of what we think of in terms of gases and knotty points on the body. When you start talking about older systems of the way they looked at the human body, chi was how we were trying to understand acupuncture, where you could poke the left arm. This was during Nixon period. You poked the left arm, and you had a response in the right arm. How does that work? There's no circulatory system that connects those two. Well, that would, at that time, anesthesiology was, blood goes round and round and air goes in and out, and anything contrary is not a good thing. That is the anesthesiologist's creed. They had no concept of other things going on in circulatory systems until the microtubule proposition that started with the University of Washington, not Arizona, with Hammeroff. Hammeroff was 25 years later. And it was Dr. Burgess, Dr. Black, Dr. Chapman, and myself. And that was under John Bonica. And that was way back when. And we today, the Czechs in astronomy, were talking about cosmobiology, which would suggest that the storms on Jupiter are representing metaphor of something going on with mankind on Earth. It's a metaphor. It wasn't astrology. It was lunar sex cycle of the female. Janov had written a book that when a woman is born, a biological clock is set on the phase angle between the moon and the sun, and that determines when she ovulates. And if she moves around the Earth where that cycle changes, so her cycle does also change. Back then, they had me do a study on the planet Uranus, that when Uranus and Earth and the sun were in a certain geometric alignment, there was a major earthquake on Earth, 3 sigma error coefficient. That means a 99.99975% probability of the event. And I used the 360 at the UW to confirm that, going back in history to document whether that law, that was a Department of Interior study. And I have to tell you, there are things going on today that involve technology. Today, hypnosis is a hard science, and you have certification. ESP is still a little goosey, and at some point there will be a certification for psychics on our psychic hotline. Just watch and see how that plays.
That would be interesting. How will you certify them?
If I may just continue a little bit, the CIA was very interested in Stan Grof's experiments in Bethesda, a naval hospital there, and they started spiking. First, they invited a Navy intelligence up to a party and spiked them, and one guy thought he was going crazy and jumped out the window. Then they hired hookers to work for them in San Francisco and slip it to their johns in the drink. And then when the students in Santa Barbara and elsewhere started getting uppity and trying to stop the war, and the blacks in the ghettos tried to stop the war, they decided they would distribute crack cocaine to the blacks and give us students LSD as much as we wanted. And so began, and it was distributed free at concerts and so forth. The idea, as far as CIA, they wanted somebody to interrogate enemy agents. The reality, though, is people kept having spiritual experiences and realizing that same thing that you've been saying, Richard, that basically mind and matter are entwined, and that's the thing about your model. I really wanted to know a little bit more about it. Does it imply causality? If you're saying it's in your mind, is that simultaneous with external resonances, or is it a causal model? Is your model a system model or a sequential?
The model I'm trying to use talks about resonant cavity oscillators like Michael Razi and the soil or your gut, where it's a hierarchy of organisms dialoguing with one system on up to the next one. And it's just a model that I have. But that model would suggest that there are higher body forms than the physical. Just like in a holographic system, the way emotional energy is considered more detail about the physical, like how you feel about the physical. And so it's a holographic system based around information rather than measured in space and time. And the quantum systems. And today, we're now realizing that information isn't what we really think it is. Because there is a theorem in information theory that states if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. That's fractal mathematics with Mandelbrot, Julia, and May pattern.
Wow. Well, let me interject here. This is all fascinating. I think we're onto something. So, the Mod Talk. Are you familiar with the Mod Talk program? And they would get these kids, and they would put them on LSD. They used a lot of LSD. Montauk was Dr.
Carl Schleicher. That was his bailiwick. MRU was charged. It was the outer thing out of Wisconsin Avenue that was there to discover the paranormal studies of weirdness in terms of what does this mean. And I was Northwest Regional Director, which means I did everything on the West Coast. Montauk was Dr. Carl Schleicher's event. Basically, that was an event where they were trying to do stealth or cloaking devices using radar. And what happened next is a phenomena happened where apparently there was a phase shift in matter and the displacement where bodies were placed inside steel corridors and things of that nature. It was terrible. People were killed. We still have no idea what it all means. Just like when I did shapeshifters out here on the West Coast, I don't know what a shapeshifter is. I can tell you that I now believe there are life forms that live among men that are not human. Like, for example, the Dalai Lama is a type of memory, has a memory of previous lives. Who do you know has that? Literally, like a Dalai Lama. Or there was a grandfather, Joseph Montanga, that died in the crossroads when Jim Morrison was 10 years old. They crossed over to the other side. They don't die. It's like a nomads in Pierce Brosnan movie where there are kinds of entities. I remember the first parapsychological book was presented at the Royal Academy in England called The Secret Commonwealth of Elf, Faun, and Fairy. And today we have movies like Bright. Now, Bright and those kinds of movies are what are going to make it real. Because once you see it in your mind's eye, that's what makes it real. How that works, I have no idea at this time. That is the concept of psyche into matter. And by the way, I also studied with James Hillman and have a doctorate in Jungian psychotherapy. And I don't think that's even going to give me close to the answer. Trying to marry soft sciences with the hard, rigorous ones, and there's somehow Malcolma in the middle. Malcolm, sorry.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the movie Bright. And you said that Bright. What's going on in the movie Bright?
Well, they had fairies and they had orcs. You know, just like, well, yeah. And the fairies were little obnoxious little, yellow jackets that are bothering you for your food. I don't know what it all means. My daughter, when she was filming a solar eclipse 2 years ago, caught something in her camera, and so she stayed with that, and it was a light that moved along in her garden. And I have no idea what she was filming. It was an anomaly. But on closer inspection, when I went down on a single frame, you can see the wings. What does that mean?
I had someone took a picture out my window, and when you zoomed in, it was the exact shape of a little fairy, but it was light.
I know. What does that mean?
Why is there a fairy in my yard? Yes.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
What about? I had a friend here from Australia filming some birds in the sky, and all of a sudden, she has a picture of what looks like a fish falling from the sky. The end of days? I don't think so. It's coincidence. You caught a bird in a movement that was just at that moment looking like a fish. I don't know. I know that the brain that we call the mind is there to make all your beliefs true. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. You use your belief system like a tool. That is in another book of mine, the Protocols, trained with Navy SEAL.
Richard,
that was one where you use your belief system as a tool rather than an absolute. It's like wearing a sweater. In the hot of summer, you wouldn't dream of wearing that sweater. Now, it's your favorite sweater, so you're not going to throw it away, but it's not appropriate.
Right.
It's interesting. A alternate hypothesis is that Minerva is in the camera, that the camera has a spirit and it's showing you its spirit. That's just as a valid hypothesis, and since I thought it must at some level from this point be true, that there's a spirit in the camera that you use.
So they have captured bank robbers by looking at infrared signatures in glass. And everything captures everything else as a recording at some point. And so there is an exchange. And whether it was the chicken or the egg that came first, I don't know. I know that I am the Eggman. Cuckoo, cuckoo.
Did the egg create us?
Well, see, it's time, again, would say from a linear point of view, but see, time isn't linear, and it's not even real. Time is a duration of consciousness. It's the way you organize memory. And so what does that mean? Well, it leaves a whole vast possibilities of time travel. Synchronicity, when you are in an event like right now, and you and I are talking about things, and one thing stands out way, way more important to you than any other. That is how a future timeline talks to the moment or your present. And if you pay attention to that, watch what happens next. You go from what is called the profane into the sacred.
So what you're paying attention to, you create. Is that what you're saying? So what if something
that is absolutely we are creating the apocalypse. That was Joseph Campbell. He said, quote, "When you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential."
So we can also create bliss. We don't always have to go to the apocalypse. We can reverse and pay attention to what is exciting and interesting and makes you happy. And I think that's intentional. I think that was like a program put in place for us to always be paying attention to the apocalypse, to the, in Revelations it was the end of the world, and so we're always going into this end of the world. But we don't have to. The other side of the continuum is going into bliss and happiness, and that everybody gets their needs met, and,
some of us have a TARDIS, a get-out-of-jail card.
Right. Remember the end of Star Wars that everybody watched 100 times? That was a happy ending, right? Everybody survived, and they were singing a very uplifting song full of trumpets and, putting all these awards on them for having saved humanity. So that's one of our choices. But right now, it seems like the programming that's coming down from whoever it is, the Illuminati or whatever, it's constantly programming us for drama, trauma, and that is affecting us, and we're going down this apocalyptic road.
That's why I would suggest our system's been invaded.
But Richard, it's got to be coming out of our psyche too. It's got to be coming out of our psyches too, because we're perceiving it.
That's true. I agree with that. Yes. We're part of something more going on. And I don't have that answer. I'm not sure it's answerable. It's kind of like, doesn't have an answer, doesn't work that way. I don't know.
Look at it, though. Look at it. We don't have to have the answer. I think that's part of the problem. I have to have the answer. No, we're on the journey, but we can course correct and say, "Wow, we're all getting all psyched out and negative here. Let's do something fun. Let's do something different." Do we really need to go down that road? If we are going down the road where we're focusing
there's another thing here, though, that you have to discuss. It's called values. Each of us have a different set of values, and certain values, are more important than others. I once dated a woman, who valued not truth above. She would rather not have a problem than know the truth. That didn't work very well for me. There are people like that, and values are important, and that's actually what makes us unique. It's called wounding, and we have wounds, and our behavior is what causes us to associate with our wounds, and that's what happens at the end of the day, is intent. But really, our purpose, if you follow systems of magic like Aleister Crowley, would state that, if you're doing your true will, none shall say nay. That would suggest that if you were actually coming from a place of purpose, you would not be observable or noticed by an AI. It couldn't see you. And yet, on intent, you can write an algorithm to absolutely have that stand out. Now, going from intent to purpose is a process. It is not an end goal. It doesn't work like that, or at least not as I'm discovering it. It's ever present, and what you're trying to do is turn a wound into a blessing. Anger, for example, is a tremendous tool to wash a kitchen floor.
Right.
Well, then there it is. That's how you have to approach the whole thing. You've got a wound. This is what makes me different than you. And how am I going to use that to my advantage to accomplish my purpose? And that is why you're here, is to discover how to do that. And when you talk about 5 grams of structured water, that's enough memory for 100,000 lifetimes. Did you know that? In terms of the memory in water, it is 1 million times more efficient than gallium and arsenic or gallium arsenide in your so-called forbidden zone. It's 1 million times more efficient. And that's 5 grams that leaves the body at the moment of death. Isn't that interesting? I don't know what it means. I just, find it interesting.
So you're talking about what were you going to say, Saj? Yeah.
It seems very interesting the way you're describing moving through life is very much the way in the kind of psychology I do, where you identify with a centering process. We think that for many people, it's their wounds and the way they cover up their wounds to deal with the world that makes them project. For example, if you don't let yourself get angry because it's unsafe to be angry, then angry seeing it in other people, the judgment of that others are angry means that you have something to do with your own anger. And when you go deeper,
projection of the shadow is what that's called. Yes.
All the things that you want really have at their basis when you say, why do you want that? Why do you want to, say, hit somebody or yell at them? Oh, and you say, well, when did you pick that up? You'll say, because what I really need underneath those wants is attention, affection, kinesthetic touch, or something very okay, and once you get in touch with the needs, you can integrate them into your functioning, and you won't have the judgments that keep you alienated from others. That's my take.
So I don't know where this is all going, but I have a new book I'm writing called The Magical and Ritual Use of Metaphor, Archetypal Gods in Daily Living. It's got 22 chapters. Go figure. Now,
that makes sense to me.
You're either possessed, one story, or you're complexed, more than one. And if you're complexed and can identify the storyboards going on inside you, now you can change the movie if you don't like the endings.
Wow, that's great.
Now that is a physicist trying to integrate the concepts of altered states of consciousness with the idea that these different altered states hold different laws of physics. And over here, your ability in guessing is 400 times over where you are right now. And over here, you can have the strength of 10, like a tweaker. And over here, you can. It's placebo is where we're starting right now in the ability to heal ourselves in our mind's eye by going to subtle bodies outside the physical body with microdosing with LSD or mushrooms. Now, LSD, as I said, is a toxin, but lysergic acid amide, that neurotransmitter is the aha that connects one dot with another, and that's what connects one universe with another, and how imagination becomes real. There's dimethyltryptamine, that chill that goes up your spine. That is dimethyltryptamine. Actually, it's N, comma, and hyphen dimethyltryptamine. I grew up with Shogun and some of these guys trying to understand these things as a physicist. I can't. So what I'm trying to do now is find a bridge over these troubled waters, because physics itself does not have the answers. Truly, it doesn't. It is just as limited as religion. And I'm guessing that's why we have two brains, where everything is a cavitation process between here and there. Just like life and death is a thin membrane where a drop of water hits a pool of water, and a series of events then begin to happen. The first is the wave going outward is your future. The wave going inward forms up a bubble that pops back up again off the water surface, only now it is no longer a drop of water. It is a bubble of structured water capturing the medium in which it fell. And that is the very principle of cavitation processes and the concepts that they're now studying on cold fusion at MIT.
Well, we're going to run out of time here, and we're going to have to come back after the break. The music will be coming on any second now, so we will be picking up this interesting conversation in just 5 minutes. And I'm waiting for the music. There it is. Okay, we're back in 5. See you in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Wadiya will remain a dictatorship. Oh, be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
Ohio Exopolitics will be on from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A. Mark Schneider will have guests on that will discuss many important topics, including the state of the world today. However, much of the show will be dedicated to the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. Let me read a short passage from one of his writings. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. Please join Mark on Ohio Exopolitics from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos. I'm your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the amadpainter. And our guest today is Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and we're having a great conversation on neurotransmitters and altered states of consciousness and then things. But we need to do our commercial before we go back to the show, because that's how we pay all our bills here at Revolution Radio. So please do take a few minutes and go over and make a donation. We're behind. We need some more funding here so we keep on the air and keep paying the bills and keep the lights on. So thank you very much in advance for your donation, and we really appreciate that you are supporting our station. So Dr. Lessin, are you there? Are you back from the break?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Anything you want to say before we bring back Dr.
Listen, I got to say that in a way I'm loath to speak at all like you're talking, Richard, because I want to hear what you got to say, and I already know what I got to say. But I can't help popping in with questions. So, but I look forward to this next section. We're going to, I hope, get to deal with the archetypes that we all have to deal with. Which ones do we impress? Which ones do we identify with? And which ones do we think are out there, not in us?
Back to you, Dr. Rick.
Are we there yet? Well, I have to wonder. Yeah, I'm old and grumpy, and so I don't hear very well, and you're just going to have to excuse an old man's fumbling. Please excuse me. Regarding archetypes, I have found that a very useful model. And so I'm more like an imaginal psychology, a third-generation James Hillman. I studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and several others, but James Hillman was my lead, and gave me some very powerful tools to use in my writings with physics. And what I'm trying to do now is understand basic storyboards in the big city. The Greek technologies were softer sciences than we had, where they believed that the gods had storyboards that played within man, and you were either possessed, one story, or you were complexed, more than one. And most of us have 5 or 6 primary stories going on at each time. Some of us are a little more complex and might have another 2 or 3 stories. Once you can identify the metaphor, and that's Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson said, "What is your metaphor? But to serve your paradox. It is the way you connect one thing with another." And humans have a very unique way of doing it, which we call memes. But memes are different for different kinds of mammals. And when you talk about cetacean, and I've done Dolphins Plus in Key Largo. I have not been to the one in Hawaii, but I did the original Berkeley labs and with John Lilly. And I can tell you that when I was in a tank working with Cosmo or some of these other dolphins, I felt like I was in the presence of an alien, something that was way more aware than me. When I was doing a play at Dolphins Plus, the handler had 2 dolphins come up on either side of me where I could grab a fin on each one, and the 2 would move me through the water. And Cosmo came up knowing that my left arm wasn't real. I have no bone in my left arm. Most people don't know that. It's 4 inches shorter. It's an old war wound, 200 bone pieces taken out. It's mostly titanium. And the dolphin, without the handler knowing it, started towing me differently than he would have otherwise, because the dolphin could see that it wasn't, bone was there. They have vision in areas and bandwidths that we do not. And when you realize that that mammal has a language that is 10 times more efficient than Old Hebrew. I studied with Gershom Scholem. When I came out of graduate school, I got assaulted by lodges. And when I was teaching at Harvard, I taught 11 years at Harvard. And if you don't think Skull and Bones was all over me like crepe, it was terrible. I had to armor up and protect myself, just like I did when I was in high school. High school, I got assaulted by Christians that were trying to make everybody a missionary. And what I did is I armored up by becoming a Missouri Synod catechism, so I could at least argue my way out of something. And when I came out of grad school, it was the same thing. Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove. I got offers from a Republican Party out of Texas. Christ, they were everywhere. And most of these people don't know good turds from pork and beans. And what I'm trying to do is get along. I don't want to join a club. I'm an independent. I have my own ideas, and I have my own sale. And, I'm a GS-18, captain and commander. I don't report to anybody above me anymore. Did you know that? It's kind of cool. I'm a civilian.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's a GS-18 rating. And I, will not, I don't know anybody that's smarter than me. Why would I want to take orders from somebody stupider? Especially when it's my life involved. Well, I've got a right. That's what made me God's favorite. I have choice. My choice is said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's why the military used me. I was, when I was in high school, Old man DuPont came to my graduation in high school. I couldn't believe it. He spoke at our assembly. And then when I graduated from Pullman, he was there to take me back east and educate me. And he stuck me at Delaware, and then he had me at Princeton, MIT, and then later at Harvard, where I taught. And I worked for the old man, and basically that was Navy intelligence. And that's where I got to in the experimental research station in Wilmington. I was walking down a hall, and I saw this one door open, and inside, this guy was working on a three-dimensional color TV. This is 1967. That was Gabor. That's where I met Gabor. He had just gotten a Nobel Prize for that work, and that's what led me to write a holographic concept of reality. And from that place, we moved from quantum mechanics to what we call holographic universes. But I can tell you today that that is inequipped to deal with what we're now discovering. And so I don't know where we're going to go. It's exciting to realize that altered states, when you're in an altered state, the laws of physics change. And what I'm trying to do now is map those. And where one starts and the other ends.
So when you're in an altered state, so how do you know this? Are you monitoring somebody in an altered state? And
you listen. You personally have gone through probably a dozen altered states since we've started this program.
Right.
And you're going in and out of them without awareness, like daydreaming. When you daydream, my goodness sakes, do you realize what you can do when you're in a daydream state? It's unbelievable. And healing, where you can make endorphins and other kinds of releases of neurotransmitters that will allow you to do things with your body, that's what shock is about when you go into an altered state. There's all different kinds of them, and we have not even begun to study these yet. And yet, the Greek and their archetypal encounters, that their whole sciences were based on that. And they basically suggested that there were 22 stories in the big city, and they're storyboards for man, and that, these were the paths on the tree of life. And that if you could identify what storyboard was going, well, each one has an ending. Is that going to suit your purpose? And if it isn't, that's when you reach in and change the movie. And your upper brain is a tool in a toolbox that allows you to, I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it. It makes all your beliefs true. And if the belief isn't working, you reach down and change the belief. Mm-hmm. Just like that. And I have a whole chapter on how to do that. That is the entire construct of Scientology with L. Ron Hubbard and how they first started that whole construct of holosync and the uses of brain drivers and frequency following function to use the brain entrainment process, which is a chapter in another book I've written already on how I train SEALs. And basically, brain entrainment is a powerful tool. You can jump technologies of meditation 30 years in less than 2 years. You can have the same brain. It's not quite as efficient. And actually, Persinger's work up in Ottawa has to do with bliss states, which is one part of the brain. However, if you look at the brain as an amorphous semiconductor, it's a liquid crystal. Basically, it's constantly flowing, which defines it as a four-dimensional hologram, which is capable of 5 space. And that's what a hologram is. N dimensions of information in n-1 dimensions, like a fractal. And what you do is if you can go to different parts of the brain, you can change the movie because of the view. There is a study right now called the Wernicke correction down near the reticular activating center, that if you can go to the Wernicke correction with hypnosis There is a phenomenon called the Mars Project that comes out where every single human being, cross-culturally, that means Philippines, Chinese, whatever, everyone has a memory of having worked on Mars. Now, how does that work? Is that archetypal? Probably. And we don't even understand what archetype means yet in that sense of it. And that's the part I'm very interested in. How we have alien abductions, we have close encounter, we have targeted individuals. Are these events really happening to these people, or is it schizophrenia? Well, maybe something else is happening archetypally. And basically, consciousness is less real in certain dream states, like lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming actually literally has more content to physical reality than consciousness does. So when you talk about trying to grasp what's going on when you're awake, this is a dream state. It's not going to be as accurate as some of the dream states that you currently enjoy. And so that's where I'm trying to go now, is mapping these different places and physically trying to enter them using my mind's eye, creative visualization. There are resonant cavity oscillators that if you look, envision in your mind's eye certain geometry, you will go into an altered state. That's probably.
I wanted to, bookmark for you.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Back a little bit before we get too far down the road. Okay, so we have. So you're saying that people have memories of being on Mars and
stuck away in certain parts of the brain. How does that work? Is it real, or is it confabulated? Well, we don't know yet.
Is it all confabulated? Is it what's real? Real is what is quote unquote real, right?
All of the above.
All the above, right? Yes. So,
yeah. Now you're getting that. That's it. Wonderful. You got it, Janet. That's it. The correct answer is yes. That's it. It's all of what you can imagine, and even more.
Right.
That is reality. Reality, according to
phenomenon. Yeah.
What's that?
I want to look for a moment at the abduction phenomenon, because it seems like more and more people are coming out that they've been abducted or they've had contact, and and they're talking about the secret space program. It's like whatever it becomes popular, more and more people start identifying with it and are coming out saying yes, it happened. Now, is this some kind of phenomenon that if it's a belief, it starts going into the psyche and becomes a reality?
You can approach it two different ways, and one of them is dimensional math, where you suggest a knot theory. Rather, that's Kaufman. That's the mathematics that's used now over string theory. It's called knot theory. It's taking a plasma and tying it into a knot, and a specific kind of bowline or a slip knot has a kind of reality in the way it relates to itself, which is different than another kind of knot. And we have these different timelines that intersect at certain node points where the knot connects, where the plasma will not allow the string to merge with itself. So, it's a visualization thing. And basically, Hollywood, if she could, because once Hollywood produces something and the public sees it, that's when it becomes real. Literally. A 3D printer used to be a replicator. That whole concept of liquid metal that we're now talking about basically came out of, the aliens versus predators. And so the liquid metal, the ability to have a nanite type of relationship to things. When I was in anesthesiology, the guy next to me, Delgado, was doing chip implants with rhesus monkeys, and he was trying to develop a site-selective molecule that he could design and put in the drinking water that would go directly into the brain rather than him having to surgically place it in the brain. And now they call those bio-APIs. What do you think is being deployed in chemtrails? I have no idea. I can imagine. I can tell you that anything that you can imagine in chemtrails is true, and probably more. I know that Reedsport, Oregon, they deployed lithium as an experiment to see if they could lock down a small city. They deployed lithium on the society without their permission. They just did it.
Of course, they do that all the time.
That happened
to...
well, it was almost 3 Thanksgivings ago. Yeah, Reedsport everybody was sick, and they couldn't understand what was happening. And we went in and did panels, blood panels and things, trying to see how bad it was. It was terrible, and that was just the Navy trying to determine whether they could lock down a small town in unrest using chemtrails. It's not just about weather.
Wow.
There's anything goes. That's like out of Indiana Jones when they opened that movie on the Temple of, anything goes. It's crazy. And the problem I'm having now is that I keep coming back to paranoid thinking. And why am I being paranoid? Well, that came out of Tavistock. And there's your CIA. That's what the CIA was interested in, mind control. And what they did out of Tavistock, they now have protocols called gang stalking that is, you'll never really know what is actually happening. And it drives you nuts trying to figure it out. And they can take you out just like that. Now, that's a wound festering. And if you can get beyond that, good luck. Now you have empowerment.
LSD psychotherapy, they were using, that's what Groff was using, LSD, to activate the altered states and to accelerate the healing process so people could get out of their wounds.
It's like, we all of us get into ruts of our belief systems, and we begin to think that that's all there is. And we miss the bigger picture.
Right.
Belief systems are tools.
If we stop being a walking, wounded inner child going through life, then I think we might break this matrix and be able to...
Well, that's another model, where we're in the future and we've decided to take time out because time isn't real, and we're taking a little thrill ride down the roller coaster. And so we've checked in like a theater and have entertainment because time isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you want to... you have a choice in choosing how you want to see how something is going. For me,
right.
I'm going to try to choose my glass half full. And how did the Beatles put it? Everything works out in the end. If things aren't working out, it's not yet the end.
Ah.
Yeah, circular. Well, a Tibetan koan, yeah. In fact, by the way, in that crashed spaceship on the other side of the moon, I'm guessing it's Buddhist. From a previous epoch.
Why makes you think it's Buddhist?
Well, the Buddhists, their whole concept of metaphor is exceptional from my point of view as a physicist. I grew up in Buddhist missionary schools in the Philippines in the late 40s, and I got bullied. I was Caucasian, and so that's where I learned how to fight, on the streets of the Philippines when I was a little boy. However, I also learned how to play chess. And when I went to Nepal and then Tibet, let me tell you, I was feeling like I was getting closer to God. As a metaphor.
Who's God in your mind?
What's that?
Who's God?
Yeah, God is that which cannot be known. You can, as definition, you can experience him, but you can't know him. And that's the limitation of what distinguishes God from man. Castaneda said that there were 4 enemies of man. He said the first one was fear. That's what most of us encounter, is fear. We're uncertain. And once you overcome fear, you have a degree of personal power. And that becomes corrupting. Power has a tendency to corrupt. And so once you overcome that by seeing things more clearly, clarity in itself becomes an enemy of man. And of course, the fourth one is what I currently enjoy: old age. Too old to do anything about it. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
To avoid corruption? Is there any way to avoid corruption?
I know that I don't know, because I know that it doesn't work that way. I think it's something far simpler and more complex. That imagination. And if you want to stimulate imagination, go for it. That's why all saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation, training the mind. For me, that's essential, because I've got a great imagination, and if I'm not careful, killer clowns from space, there it is.
That's one of the backstories of why the extraterrestrials think that humanity is so valuable, is because we have the ability to image, to imagine, to bring things from imagination into physicality.
It is a truthful reality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sash, questions. Where do you want to go? We got.
I'm interested in this in what I call the awareness process, which instead of when you transcend a demand or a want, you don't get rid of it. You address the needs that motivate it, and so. For example, fear. If you do without fear, you don't find out what's underneath it. The function of fear is you need to pay attention to things. If you disregard your fear, you'll be totally run by your fearless part, which may be a primary person part, and not be able to deal with things. And so with every level. Same with power and giving and taking and balancing. I think rather than transcend and get rid of, it's more like transcend and incorporate into a larger being. And the idea of higher or lower is interesting too. I think that's part of our addiction to hierarchy, and that you can see that there's a system, the way I think of it, where everything.
There's a word I love called inflamement, where you become inflamed with what you're doing. Perfect. Yeah. That is when it's called a flow. When everything seems to just fall into place, that is your signal for being closer to purpose than intent. And you're looking at how easily something begins to happen, where you're no longer having to fight for something. You're allowing it to unfold itself in wonderment of a moment.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Yes, and that place, that's going from the profane into the sacred, timelessness. You do that with lovemaking, becomes timeless. You're in that moment where it is no time anymore. It isn't a question of how long it took or duration. It is the moment. And what you're trying to do is take that moment and make it last longer and longer, from 1 second to the next. And that's where immortality lies.
Wow. And one of the interesting things is to actually even consider a confused part of you as a valuable part, whose contribution is to a stall for you to get more information. So everything contributes. And when you think you're totally right, and there's no doubt in your mind, and you don't even consider anything else, that means you're in a primary, and you're not seeing the other side.
And then you lose it and get knocked down. Yeah. A high flyer. You know that archetype, the high flyer? Coffee, tea, or me. I'm just kidding. there's the high flyer, puer senex, the idea of puer wounding, and then Ulysses scarring. That metaphor is where you get hurt and you act like a little child and whine, and then you accept the lesson and become Ulysses, where you're human and reject being a god.
Wow.
I have begun this process. I'm in the middle of it. I'm lost. Can you send me up a flare? It's interesting where I'm going with myself, and I'm excited because I know I'm doing it right, but validation, checkpoints, my wound, my ego. Ego, one never gets rid of ego. What one does is put it in its proper perspective in the whole of things, because ego is an extremely important tool for survival. Mm-hmm. It is what distinguishes you from me.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So people think they have to get rid of their...
You need to balance pride and humility. See, if you lock into any pole in a dichotomy, that means projected as outside of you and projected on others, and others either overly admire that part or are disturbed by them, and that's just a slap that you get for not recognizing it in yourself and being at peace the way you've been describing it.
Well, yeah, it's primary. If you can see something wrong in somebody, the only way you can do that is by knowing it's wrong inside yourself.
Yeah.
And that's called the projection of the shadow. The shadow is, in some sense, a demon, in that it is a lesser part of self. If you go to the Megaton or the Lesser Keys of Solomon and the fallen angels, so 72 of the Megaton, you will find from Babylonian periods. I taught a course in demonology, graduate level at Georgetown. Can you imagine? Because I identified 68 of those sigils that are, unique for each demon, that based on a magic square in their name, like Uriel or Beelzebub. You have a B, A, you move it around on this moon magic square, and it creates a sigil. That's 19th century magic. But all of those sigils came from Babylonian star maps. And so what I did is I upgraded them to the new star positions in the universe. And if you don't think the Jesuits wanted that information, man. Oh, man, they're taking notes like crazy. I identified 68. And what a demon is basically a quality in man deemed unworthy of man, like jealousy, rage, anger, Beelzebub. All these different things were qualities based on star maps in Babylonian periods that were deemed unworthy in man. And that was called the Lesser Keys of Solomon. The Greater Keys of Solomon was the same thing with angels. Greater. That means they're 5-dimensional, where man is 4-dimensional, and a demon would be your shadow. It's you projected onto the ground as a lesser form of you in reference to the sun or some reference point. And that's basically what a demon actually was. Now, there's other interpretations biblical, and they're all valid, but that is the one that I choose to use in my systems of magic, trying to relate one thing to another. You can use a demon then, jealousy, I'm envious, I'm angered, I'm enraged, whatever, as a tool. And that's where Mephistopheles might call up, Faust would call up Mephistopheles and use him as a tool to do something. It is a metaphor, again, in terms of how you relate to the physical world.
Yes. You know, in psychology, we say that any human impulse becomes demonic when it's denied and it gets projected in that way, and so it's when you lose your center and the ability to hear more than one side that you're then you're in automatic. You're possessed by the archetype
you're possessed.
Center,
you become possessed. Yeah.
At the center of every single one of our subpersonalities is an archetype, like your inner critic. Most people have an inner critic. Inside, there's a part of you that is telling you what you're doing right and how to improve things. You just got to get down to the needs.
Well, that's the inner dialogue that your friend Stanislav Grof, others discussed, was how do you do that inner dialogue? I did it by doing honest journaling. Ira Progoff. I like Stephen Kaplan Williams and the Jungian Sinai Dream Manual. That has some protocols that are very useful in the system that I used. You keep a diary. Today, you can do that on your computer, where you just basic, it's called your magical memory. Basically, it's stuff that you remember but you've forgotten, and when you go back to it, it is a snapshot of that moment and the brain that was writing it at that moment. That is a form of going into the past as time travel. That is what your magical memory is about, and how you go back in time, going back to your journal and re-experiencing the same hologram the brain was in when it recorded that moment. As a metaphor again. I'm not being absolute. Yeah.
It's wonderful. The next step in the Progoff method is then you read through the keys, the golden threads, like all the spiritual threads, and you put them in a category. All the
inner dialogue,
threads, all the
relation
threads, and you get to see the tapestry of your existence, and you'll see that there are some consistent threads, and there's some roads not taken. That now, that from this perspective, you can reintegrate them. It's a wonderful system. I used it too.
The bad news is that self-realization is only halfway to God. The other half requires a pilot, usually in a helicopter, going straight up. Well, it's, people do not have any idea at all. Self-realization, dialoguing with your inner self. I was blessed. I came out of the crib talking to myself. So right out of the gate, I was blessed in that regard. I had dialogue with my inner self as a child. That means at any given moment, I know exactly how I feel about something. It changes every minute, too, by the way, because of altered states.
So you remember when you came out? Do you remember being born and having a dialogue with yourself?
I remember things before I was 2 years old. There are things I don't remember. I do have specific memories of certain events when I was 2 years old. My neck, for example, was broken when I was 4, and I had no memory of that except it was when I went in to save my mother from what my birth father was doing to her. He was beating her up, and I went in to save her, and he nearly killed me, broke my neck. And even today, the military never even found that break because it was up right at the very top of the brainstem. There's scar tissue, which means I list to the left by 12 degrees. And why? All my wounds, physical wounds, my knee, my hip, my arm, my trigeminal nerve are all on the left side of my body. I tried to figure out why all my wounds are on this side of the body, and it goes back to when I was 4 years old and my neck was broken. Isn't that interesting?
That
it's I do. It's probably not the true memory, but I remember being thrown against the wall. I remember him grabbing me. I remember him placing me in an oven and turning it on. My mother found me. I was half-baked. Yeah, it's okay. My father that raised me taught me to be a monster. There isn't anything I can't do. From a large machinery to tennis to I was never best at anything. I could do everything well, which is okay. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be, ambidextrous. I wanted to. Now, my left arm, for example, is 4 inches shorter because it has no bone in it. My elbow's a wire strap. I have all my nerves, and I have carpal tunnel because of the scar tissue and so on, pinching now that nerve. But otherwise, I was very lucky. I had a MASH surgeon that saved my arm. It took him 3 surgeries to do it, but here I am. The only thing I can't do now is pick my nose. I can blow it like an Amish.
You can't pick your nose.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just kidding. I don't want to get too serious. It's interesting to realize that it's like Ulysses scarring again. It's like being able to realize you're not going to be perfect, and it's okay, because what I am is a perfect whatever I am. That's Steve Gaskins in Monday night class in Berkeley when he drew a circle on the blackboard and he said, may not be a perfect circle, but it's a perfect whatever it is. He later went on and formed a thing called The Farm out of Tennessee. But I knew him at Berkeley. I was one of those kind of guys. And I remembered everything. And somehow was blessed enough to be able to integrate it into this moment.
That's all we have. Yeah.
Now, how do I get over to Hawaii? I do workshops. I'd love to come visit. I can sing for my dinner. I love Hawaii. I could not live there. Yeah. I would never get anything done Hawaiian time. But it's a perfect place to chill out. I especially love the Big Island. I did all the business plans for Parker Ranch and Hamakua Sugar with Old Man Morgan and Rick Vidgen with the avocado. I had a girlfriend. She lived in the jungles in where was that? Near Captain Cook and ataraxia. And she grew pot, and they were putting in avocado trees. And I used to go over and visit her as a lover. And I got into knowing the kahuna. It's Melvin Mason now. He was 10 years old when I went over there to go up into the Waiapio to find some of my seals that had dug in after the war. And the kahuna took me in about 18 miles of pathways going into the Waiapio. And Melvin was 10 years old. He remembered his grandfather taking me in. And I did some workshops over there a few years back, and now Melvin is the current kahuna for that island. And it's all changing, though, and it's different today. I specifically like Kapuna. I used to go up there. And down near Volcano, there's a place called Green Lake that's very, very cool. It's one of the pools called Green Lake. But that whole island is supposedly going to go up in 3 pieces and come down. You're on Maui, and I think you're going to be fine. I don't think there'll be, but the Big Island, I think, is going to become toast shortly.
What makes you think that?
The Navy has a map a future map of the world, and they use the one by Chet Snow. That's the one the military uses. There's many different maps. Chet Snow is the one the military uses as worst case scenario. Hawaii, the Big Island, is gone. Maui's fine. Changed a little bit. Some of the new islands will emerge down near Oahu and that area. But I can tell you that all of the world is about to go through a change. Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, is now stating, because of the solar minimum, that we're now most likely at least in North America, going to experience the coldest winter in recorded history, and that by 2024 there will be parts of Canada that are uninhabited because of the solar minimum. Right now, the weather that we're experiencing here in Oregon, Southern Oregon, Free State of Jefferson, where I live, is really abnormal, completely out of whack. We're already getting, mist in the early mornings. We wouldn't normally see that until February. So I don't know for a fact, but I'm going to say what I do is urban survival skill workshops. And if you have your water together, you already have a 50% chance of survival right out of the gate. Water will be, with any kind of change, global change, whether it's a pandemic, it's a geographical change like an earthquake, or it's whatever. They're saying now it will be an 8.4 off of Crescent City out in the ocean that will drop the Pacific coast. And that's when most likely Hawaii will go within a week. You'll have about a week's warning.
Okay, so what's going to make this happen? What makes this happen? See, we were talking to a fellow, and he said that the pyramids for what was his theory about they regulate these volcanoes and that they are set in place. So the pyramid of Giza.
That's Captain Cathay ley lines. I don't know how credible that is. I don't know. Isaac Bonwit was a druid.
The Anunnaki came in here, and if we had people that are on the advanced level, they can look at a whole planetary system and they know the whole solar system. And so apparently, this fellow said that these pyramids are in place because these are changes that do happen, and they have these regulators, and they tie in with the moon. And that Mars has some pyramids, and these pyramids are connected somehow, and they help regulate so we don't go into this if you think in terms of there's an advanced species that could come and figure this out, this might be a possibility. But he's also saying that he thought this was like a season, like we're just coming up in a new season, and that periodically this stuff happens. So I
can tell you that the salt solution in the ocean is such that the day after tomorrow must happen. How long it's going to be and how many Gutenberg Bibles there'll be to burn, I don't know. I don't think it'll last very long in the reboot, but that is an absolute, it must happen. The currents in Europe are gone. The Gulf Stream is gone. The ocean must, as a physics thing, reboot. And all the ice in in Iceland is now melting. They're talking about the northern territories and how they're starting to get very strange. I think that we're going to have a rough winter. I think we're going to have a change in our seasonal expectations. And I think that there will be survivors, absolutely. But there will be blood.
So what is causing it in your scenario?
It's the primary that JPL and Suspicious Observer, others are saying, is the sun, the solar minimum. We went through a period of dark matter now, and what we call dragon tails. They were ionized gases in deep space that caused a reversal in our pole shift. I think it was back in 2014. It's going to be the sun probably. I know that Uranus in the study I did, I don't understand, but that again is a metaphor where we assume that space is about physical things, and it may be something else quite different than what we've imagined. That's your ley line concept. We have an Oregon vortex here. Yeah, we have an Oregon vortex, and one of the things I did back in the 70s is I had an old CBY that did about 20,000 feet, and I went over it with an interferometer, and light was bending at 20,000 feet. Now, how does that work? Well, there's only one thing I know that will cause that kind of an anomaly, and that's a mini black hole. and the Bermuda Triangle and some of these other ley lines that seemingly have anomalies like that. I'm guessing there are all kinds of technologies that we haven't actually started to sharpen up yet.
So you said earlier that we're making this up, right? So why would we make up this huge end of the world and mass destruction and people dying?
Well, and there's global historical. I mean, we can do ice plugs in Antarctica and we pull them out, and there was an ice age there, and there's another one there, and we've had cyclic events occur, and here we are. 26,000 years, we're coming back to the same place we were, and we're due. So it's a cyclic thing. I don't know if it's like Nibiru. When we talked about Nibiru, I had a friend at JPL that said, the IR signature is wrong for that star. And the other side, it's probably got a Dyson sphere around it. And I had to pop up the smart answer saying, it's our future coming here to collect the rent, because we didn't start here on Earth. Well, Mars and the Van Allen belt, I mean, there's something more going on here than our history.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I can speculate, and, there's wonderful, CBC, events that they do on, the National Geographic and so on, like that. By the way, I don't know if you knew this, but I wrote a manga comic for National Geographic on structured water for children. Water Girl and the Lost Secrets of Water.
Secrets of Water. Sounds good.
Well,
hey, Sasha,
she's a little dewdrop trying to figure out how to get to the top of a tree.
Sasha, let's chime in. Where are you, dear?
I mean, can you hear me, Janet? You seem to act like you can't hear me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I'm
here.
Now.
Can you hear me, Janet?
We're running out of time. Can you hear me, Colin?
Okay,
yes,
so what we want to do is, Richard, we want you to advertise what you really
promote. Selfless, shameful promotion. Yeah. Okay, so I have a bunch of new books out, and I have a bunch of new books coming out this week, this next month, and this before the end of the year. Right now, I have Healing Yourself, which just came out. It's $3 as an ebook. It was a book on herbs from Dr. Shook that we used when we had Open Door Clinic and started the Flying Squad, which later became 911. We had, it all started with the Seattle Fire Department in Seattle and a bunch of convicts working out a survival center and Open Door Clinic. And a lot of the women, wanted natural forms of remedies, and Healing Yourself is a really good, simple book on old remedies. The only thing that's wrong in that book that I mentioned caution on today is pennyroyal for abortion, because pennyroyal has now been discovered to cause internal bleeding in 1 in 4 women. It will absolutely abort a child, but it's dangerous. The next one that's coming out and next month is called Stress Management, and it's the system that Richard Nixon used when I used to go into the Oval Office. And basically, the whole concept of that is basically that you have so many different things that you do that cause stressor points to you. You get a divorce, that's 20 points. You pick up a new home, move, that's 12 points. You add these up, once it's over a certain amount of stressor points, you will get sick. And that's called stress management. And then the new one that will be out before the 1st of December for Christmas will be the non-local mind in a holographic universe, how to change the movie. I hope to come out with the magical and ritual use of metaphor sometime in January. It's already written, so it's just a question of money and taking incomes. Nick Begich is doing the forward in the non-local mind, and that book is dedicated to my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner. Krippner is the man that introduced me to Ed Mitchell in 1970 that allowed me to be at Mission Control in 71 to do the ESP studies and write the ESP induction through forms of self-hypnosis. That's one of the reasons I debriefed Dr. Milan Riesel when he defected from Czechoslovakia. I'm writing up a storm. I have over 40 manuscripts that are all like Spook Central, the work I did when I worked at MRU. I have the Marshall papers. Bob Marshall was the idiot savant that worked with Buckminster Fuller, and I had a bunch of hedronists. These are people that work with math, do analysis on his writings, and we have photographs of his writings, and then we have mathematical interpretation. Bob Marshall is the one that came up with Riemann's solution. Nobody in over 100 years has met Riemann's challenge, and Bob Marshall did it visually. Riemann challenged the mathematical community to come up with a mathematical expression for recurring primes. 17, 19, 23. Okay. And Bob Marshall did it by envisioning a cone with a certain geometric shape to it, and then running numbers around in the opposite direction in a cone and drawing a straight line through it. That's chapter 4. It's unbelievable. Okay, I have another one called the SEAL Reports on the work I did for Navy SEALs. The list goes on and on. I have a bunch of manuscripts. And then you move to agriculture. And I have got a new one called...
To be continued.
We'll have you back again.
Nice being with you. Thank you for having me.
Nice being with you too. Aloha.
Thank you, Richard. Make care.
You betcha. My pleasure. Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! Just a flesh wound. I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity. I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Oscar's freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. The heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling you to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting the danger, unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan.